President Trump says he plans to speak to the leaders of Thailand and Cambodia to stop the fighting.
He says he can do it pretty quickly. Thailand, though, has made it clear that its operations would not stop. Cambodia's government spokesperson says it only wants peace, insisting it had acted in self-defense as clashes escalated this week. More than 500,000 people have been forced to flee border towns since renewed fighting began on Monday.
Well, James Chin is Professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania. Prof. Chin, good to have you back on the show. So we understand President Trump will be speaking to both leaders tomorrow. I'm wondering, is Thailand in particular open to mediation, open to threats like tariffs and trade? Because we know Anutin, has shown signs of defiance. He was the one who suspended the ceasefire agreement last month. And, they've gone on to say, senior officials have gone on to say that border security and sovereignty must be separate from trade negotiations.
Good morning. So I think what we're seeing is that the escalation has gone up really to a new level. My take is that this time is much, much more serious than previous escalation because the bulk of the population on both sides of the border have actually moved out. So we're talking about somewhere between 500,000 to 600,000 people have already moved away from the border. On top of that, I think more than a dozen soldiers from both sides has also been killed. And also the airstrikes are quite serious, I've been told. But the basic problem we have now is that it's very, very difficult for the Thai government to back down for a simple reason that there was a telephone leak the last time, and that caused the downfall of the previous Thai administration. So I think it's very, very difficult for Thailand to back down. But on the other side, it's also very difficult for the Cambodian government to back down as well for similar nationalistic reason, because the strong man in Cambodia, Hun Sen, the father of the present prime minister, is personally involved in this crisis. So I'm afraid things will get a lot worse before it gets better.
Okay, so as you mentioned, given the rising military exchanges, civilian displacement, and now we hear of sporting level boycotts, how far do you think both sides are willing to take this confrontation militarily and diplomatically?
So the military thing can be resolved fairly quickly. It's a question of getting both sides to pull back from the border to stop the airstrikes. Everybody knows that the easiest solution is some sort of an observer or peacekeeping mission along the border, what normally people call no man's land. The problem is that for that thing to succeed, you need the agreement of both the Thai and the Cambodian governments. There's been talk in the background that ASEAN, especially Malaysia, is willing to send some observers to the border area to keep the peace. But again, this sort of thing requires a lot of pressure, not only from ASEAN, but external power. And this is where people like Trump can be extremely useful because Trump, as you know, he is sort of unpredictable and is willing to use all sorts of threat against both Cambodia and Thailand. But I think the phone call is important in the sense that they will lay the red line on both countries, and that will allow ASEAN to proceed. I think ASEAN collectively as a whole very much hope that, this thing doesn't escalate any further because they had a very, very successful summit in Kuala Lumpur where a peace deal was signed. So ASEAN really needs to show that it is capable of looking after its own backyard. So I think for ASEAN and the US, there was a lot of push to make sure that some sort of peace comes to the border, because all that requires is really observers, peacekeeping mission, and a long period of no conflict before you can sort of get permanent peace.
Prof. Chin, there is reported tension between Anutin and the military, which I believe effectively controls the border right now, and in terms of policy, in terms of actions on the ground. Is that making it more difficult for Anutin to reach a compromise? Because he fears a fate similar to the previous prime minister, which you mentioned very early in the interview.
Yes, but we've always known that the Thai military has always been in charge. Look, when political leaders get on the phone with Trump, right? I'm sure the Americans and the ASEAN people are talking to the military in the background. Everybody knows that the military holds political power on this issue. But I suspect if it goes any further, even the Thai military understands that they can't be fighting all the time because you're talking about 500,000 people on the border. You obviously can't shelter them, permanently. So, both sides have, how should I put it? They're under tremendous pressure to come to some sort of agreement. The problem is that how do you get an agreement when both sides do not lose face? In this part of the world, losing face is a very, very important thing. And I think they have to find a way out of this. And I suspect the only way out of this is some sort of observer mission along the border to make sure that clashes do not start again. You have to remember the current clash and the previous clash was just due to border skirmishes that escalated very, very quickly. So if you can have a no man's land between those two countries, say 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers across the line of control, I think that will work. So it's a question of who has the political gravitas to force the Thai military to come online, and also the Cambodian government. That's not an easy thing to do, but I suspect Trump is one of those personalities, a bully personalities, that can get both sides back to the table.
Okay, so if the both sides were to take steps to de-escalate this, I wonder, Professor, which government is more likely to yield first without losing domestic face, as you mentioned?
No, it has to be done jointly together. You can't have one side coming in earlier than the other side. It is obvious. We're talking about ASEAN, right? Very Southeast Asian government. So this sort of thing has been handled carefully. Nobody loses face. The easiest way to do this is to blame this on the Americans, say that you were forced by the Americans.
Okay. Prof. Shin, before we let you go, you mentioned, this buffer zone, perhaps some sort of monitoring force on the ground to keep both sides apart. So that seems to me to be a short-term solution, to stop the fighting. But there are, I suppose, other underlying, longer, more difficult questions as well. We have the temples, we have the borderlines, we have complicated domestic politics. I'm wondering, is this something that they both need to address together, or is this something that, a world body and a world power, the United Nations, the US, whatever, needs to be part of?
No, at the end of the day, these two countries have to demarcate their borders properly. The area around the temple has always been problematic. Many, many years ago, we're talking about going back decades.